Hello, everyone, and welcome to DSP versus the Internet, my weekly clips react show here on DSP Reacts. This week on its normally scheduled Sunday. This is episode 76, and I'm excited for episode 76 because there's a good variety of stuff. As always, it is the channel members that keep this show going. Whether it's the Ultra members, where we're guaranteed to watch what they submit, or the submissions tier that go into a randomized playlist, it's always a good time, and it's always a bunch of fun and variety. So let's see what you guys have in store for me this week, shall we? We start off with Japan's strangest live stream, Nasubi. I've literally never heard of it. Okay? One other thing, thank you to Pausen, who became a member this morning at the submissions tier. My bad, because I actually did not shout you out earlier. I wanted to do that now. Let's begin. Yes, we all understand fair use. So this is to inform, not encourage harassment of individuals. Okay, let's see. What is this about?
The Japanese are known for their extreme game shows, many of which have put their contestants in physical and
It's hard to hear, isn't it? It's actually hard to make out the voice.
Psychological danger to provide their audiences with a unique viewing experience. In the late 90s, early 2000s, a broadcast that many believe to be the most radical and potentially unethical instance of this aired on a Tokyo-based network called Nippon Television.
Huh.
The show was titled Susunu Denpa Shonen, and it consisted of a live stream of a single room.
What does that mean? What does that mean? Susuna Senpa Shonen. Does anyone know what that means?
Inside the room was a stack of envelopes, a rack of magazines, water, a gas burner, and one man who was asked to undergo one of the most rigorous endurance performances ever broadcast. That man was a struggling comedian desperate for fame who went by the name Nasubi.
Okay. Volume could be raised a bit? Okay. I'll increase the volume. There we go. Let me know if this is okay now.
January of 1998, Nasubi, which translates in English to eggplant, was chosen from a raffle of approximately 20 applicants for a contest titled A Life of Prizes. After winning, Nasubi was escorted to a space no bigger than a small studio apartment.
Okay.
He was asked to begin the game with absolutely nothing, including his clothes.
What?
He was given only water, and in order to provide himself with food, clothing, or any means of entertainment during his stay in the room, Nasubi must win them via sweepstakes. The sweepstakes could be found in the stacks of magazines, which he could enter by mailing contest applications using the envelopes provided.
So he had to sit there nude for weeks while he entered individual sweepstakes to win clothes to wear? But what's the chance of winning a sweepstakes? I mean, he could have gone for a year without having a piece of clothing. What? Right from the get-go, I don't understand it. This doesn't sound legit to me at all. This sounds like it's fake, right?
This was the point of the game, to survive solely on his contest prizes. Once Nasubi's winnings reached a monetary value of 1 million yen, or roughly $9,000 US, he was declared the winner and allowed to exit the room, resume his life, and enjoy his newfound celebrity. So, did Nasubi succeed? That all depends on how you define success. To answer this question, let's take an in-depth look at Nasubi's time inside the room.
I mean, I guess I have a few questions. They're saying this was for a television network, correct? What TV network would want a nude man on? Right? I guess the joke is his name is Nasubi Eggplant, so they cover his privates with an eggplant. But, like, if you've been on TV pretty much nude, like, first of all, who would have watched the show? I can understand if this was, like, some idiot doing a prank stream, or not a prank, but a stunt stream online on a streaming service. But for this to be on mainstream TV is pretty wild. Like, I don't think this would ever be on mainstream TV in the US. I guess in Japan it's different, right? So in Japan, maybe they think that this is funny or acceptable. I don't know. I'm just kind of really confused of how exactly this would have worked. And once you've been on the show, I mean, pretty much you've been exposed to the world for so long. Are you really a celebrity anymore? Or, I mean, let's be honest, does he become someone who everyone laughs at instead of laughs with? And so does this backfire? He thought he would be a celebrity, but he wins the show and everyone just hates him, right? Thinks he's a joke, a laughingstock.
Immediately upon being left alone, Nasubi's priority was to cover himself, and the very first contest he applied for during this first episode of the live stream was an apron. Not only did he not win the apron, but during his entire 15-month-long stay,
15 months!
Nasubi remained completely nude. The majority of his time was spent submitting contest applications. In the first month, Nasubi applied to 5,748 sweepstakes.
Oh my god!
While waiting for notifications of his first winnings, Nasubi was taunted by ill fortune. He answered the phone to misdialed callers, and during one frustrating afternoon, after several days without food, a ramen delivery boy knocked on Nasubi's door by mistake. But after many days of waiting, becoming desperately hungry, Nasubi finally won his first prize, 12 pots of fiber jelly, which he immediately began eating.
What is fiber jelly? Are you supposed to eat that? Or did he just start eating it because he was starving? Like, I mean, what is the humanitarian ramifications of this show? He could starve himself to death? Like, what is going on, right? This is insane.
His second prize was 5 kilograms of rice. Unfortunately, he quickly realized he didn't have a pot to cook it in. After failing to eat the rice raw, Nasubi discovered he could cook the rice in an empty fiber jelly container by setting them close to the stove burner.
Huh.
For the month of February, Nasubi continued to win the following: 1,000 yen, body soap, canned spaghetti, subsequently realizing he didn't have a can opener for the meat sauce. Despite many prizes having little or no practical value, Nasubi seemed grateful for everyone he received, and it's no doubt that with an entire waking life consisting of little more than filling out contest applications, the brief adrenaline rush of the knock at the door became his only source of excitement.
Wow.
Nasubi's basic needs, of course, had to be met, so food was of paramount.
Let's see here. So you have physiological needs of food, water, warmth, and rest, safety needs of security and safety, belongingness and love needs of intimate relationships and friends, esteem needs, prestige and feeling of accomplishment, and then self-actualization, achieving one's full potential, including creative activities. So what is this? The full, the existence pyramid? What would you even call this? Huh.
Importance. Although let's remember that the higher the monetary value of the prize, the closer Nasubi was to his 1 million yen goal.
Right.
Reaching this goal proved incredibly time-consuming. To get halfway there, it took Nasubi 6 months and 38,000 contest entries.
Wow!
During this time, some notable prizes included a bicycle, which, once the initial excitement wore off, he remembered had no practical value in his tiny room.
Right, what's he gonna do with that?
He rode it around briefly, then never again on the live stream. Panties, which was his first article of clothing, although they didn't fit. A stuffed seal, which he named Binasu, befriending it. A 14-inch TV set, although there was no antenna or cable, so all he could view was static.
Wow.
A toothbrush and toothpaste, which allowed him to brush his teeth for the first time during his 3-month stay. Around the 6-month mark, the show had become incredibly popular, and the local news media somehow discovered where Nasubi's secluded room was located.
Oh, really?
So, producers woke Nasubi in the middle of the night, blindfolded him, and escorted him to a new, yet nearly identical room.
He's not allowed to cut his fingernails or anything. Oh my god. Fucked up.
Before this moment, A Life of Prizes was broadcast on Sunday nights and edited down to a 10-minute weekly summary. But with this room switch, producers decided to offer a live web stream alternative, causing them to digitally follow Nasubi around with a joystick in order to censor his genitalia. As you can see, the quality of the live stream is primitive, but keep in mind this is in the late 90s.
I was just going to say, in the late 1990s, to see a live stream was insane. That would be like unprecedented. I'm shocked they even did it. I mean, it looks like a slideshow, but that's pretty amazing for late 90s. Damn. That's called the hierarchy of needs. The pyramid is by psychologist Abraham Maslow. Thank you. Okay.
It took Nasubi another 3 months to get 2/3 of the way to his 1 million yen goal, and throughout the months of August, September, and October, Nasubi submitted an additional 17,000 contest entries. Notable winnings included a watermelon.
I'm sure you love that.
Tickets to see Spice Girls, the movie.
What? Wait a minute. He won Spice Girls movie tickets. Oh no. Of all the things to fucking win, he won the Spice Girls Spice World movie tickets. Oh no. I think that might have actually lowered his total value of what he had won. It actually negated it by quite a bit. Oh, shit.
Chess player to go with the TV set he had won several months back.
Oh.
After this expensive win, Nasubi hit a string of bad luck. At one point, he went a week without hearing a knock at the door. And during one drastic period, Nasubi completely ran out of food. Rather than rescuing him and risk spoiling the tension of the show, producers opted to relocate Nasubi a second time in hopes that the change would bring about good luck. This new location did indeed prove lucky, as Nasubi won several very valuable prizes, including a PlayStation.
This sounds to me like bullshit. Maybe at first the show was legit, but as it gained more popularity, they realized they can't just let the show end with this guy starving, so they started faking it. Doesn't it sound like that? It sounds like they completely faked it from this point on, because there was no reason to relocate him. They did it anyway. All of a sudden, then he starts to win good prizes. So it does sound like bullshit at this point. Maybe at first it was real, but as it grew, they realized we got to keep this gravy train going. So they just started scripting it all.
In which he played non-stop for 4 days straight, but he soon banned himself from it after recognizing it as a distraction from filling out contest entries. A tent which he lived in for several days, but whose sheer size prevented him from doing his dance of gratitude during his winning moments. Worried he would appear ungrateful, Nasubi disassembled his tent and put it away. In the month of December, Nasubi won a very expensive set of automobile tires, a 10,000 yen gift voucher, and finally, putting him just over his 1 million yen goal, a small bag of rice.
So he did it.
And after 335 straight days of nothing but
sleeping,
eating food when available, eating dog food when there was nothing edible available, answering the door, and most importantly, filling out contest entries, Nasubi had finally won. Or had he? At this point, the ratings of the show hovered somewhere around 17 million Japanese viewers. For comparison, the highest watched episode of Game of Thrones sits at 16.5 million viewers. The people absolutely loved it, and the producers were making millions. The notion of ending it just yet was ridiculous. So, in the middle of the night, the producers woke Nasubi, showered him with confetti and streamers, and announced that he had finally won the contest. They returned his clothes, but Nasubi hadn't worn clothes in almost a year, and upon dressing, he'd realized he had developed a distaste for them, citing them as being itchy. Although Nasubi was under the impression that the show was over and his trip to a Korean carnival was a celebratory holiday for his hard work, little did he know that the producers had no intention of allowing him to go home yet. While still in Korea, Nasubi was blindfolded once again and guided to a fourth room, which consisted of the familiar magazine rack, stack of envelopes, and a Korean-Japanese dictionary. Despite not knowing the language, Nasubi was nevertheless instructed to put his Korean-Japanese dictionary to work applying for contests. His new goal was to earn enough prizes to equate the price of a plane ticket back home to Tokyo. It needed only be a one-way economy class ticket. After translating and applying to nearly 7,000 contests, Nasubi met his monetary goal in just 2 short months.
So it's so dumb because obviously they already violated their original agreement. It was never part of their agreement that he also had to win the value of the plane ticket home. So I get the feeling this whole thing is baloney. That after this point, he understood how popular it was. They offered him, hey, we're going to actually give you like a lot of money if you do it again for a couple more months. Let's string it along a little further. There's no way. Legally, they couldn't have done this. You know what I'm saying? Like the cops would have busted in and freed this guy. You know what I'm saying? So it's complete bullshit.
But this all happened too quick, so producers required him to make another 9,000 yen in order to upgrade his ticket to business class.
What are you talking about?
And Nasubi accomplished this by winning 2 bags of incredibly rare and expensive tea leaves. But this wasn't good enough for the producers, and so they then required him to upgrade his tickets to first class. No problem for Nasubi, who had institutionalized himself to this way of life.
Wow.
And after winning a picture frame, a fox skin, and a live octopus, Nasubi was a first-class passenger. It was finally over for Nasubi. He'd won. Producers blindfolded him and led him into his final room. Unbeknownst to Nasubi, the 4 walls of this room were collapsible, and behind them sat a live studio audience. As soon as Nasubi was left alone in his final room, habit kicked in, and he quickly undressed. After a dramatic countdown, the walls collapsed, and Nasubi was met with the cheering applause of thousands of people. The look of shock on his face was both cathartic and sad to watch. At this point, Nasubi had been living this lifestyle for 15 months, having barely spoken to another human being. He applied to 75,000 magazine contests, averaging 1,250 applications per week and nearly 200 applications per day. It took him several minutes to register what was happening. It's difficult to imagine the thoughts that must have been going through his mind in these moments. The show, Susumu Denpa Shonen, was intended to be comedic, featuring a laugh track to punctuate almost every moment featured in their broadcast. Even during the moments where Nasubi became visibly distraught, frustrated, and hopeless, the live stream would overlay silly sound effects to signal the viewer that his suffering is their entertainment, escorting them away from the intuitive response of pity. Susumu Denpa Shonen went on to film 3 more endurance experiments before being cancelled in 2002 due to the torturous nature of their content.
Wow.
Some of the other contests included requiring contestants to hitchhike across Africa, build a raft on a deserted island and float back to Tokyo, and finally, sit in a pitch-black room only to receive light and food whenever their favorite baseball team won a game.
What the hell?
Although the show was cancelled, it found a new home in 2009 on the internet under the name Number 2 Nihon Webcast. But when I went to the site for this, it appeared to be down, so I can only assume this too was ultimately cancelled. Even though most people outside of Japan aren't familiar with Nasubi or the Susumu live
I've never heard of this before.
Japan's reputation for their cruel reality television is widely acknowledged, and it has been often parodied in Western media. So the question many of you may have now is, what happened to Nasubi?
Yeah.
Did he achieve the fame and fortune
Hopefully a
he was
happy
promised
ending
for
of
his
some
remarkable
sort.
endurance? Well, yes and no. His journal of experiences, titled Nasubi's Prize Contest Life Diary, went on to be published and reached bestseller status. And despite not becoming the world-famous comedian he'd hoped to become, he did find small success in television and film acting. But it's undeniable the psychological toll the live stream had on Nasubi. Because he spent 15 months entirely naked, Nasubi reported having trouble wearing clothes after returning home.
Yeah.
And his extended solitude caused his social skills to atrophy.
Makes sense.
He found much of his comedic charm and social aptitude gone, leaving him awkward and shy. Even though Nasubi's exploits remain one of the most watched live streams in the history of Japan, this in-depth look into the brutal 15 months this man endured in order to provide us with an unprecedented viewing experience begs the question: how far should we go to entertain?
Exactly. How far should we go? Even if the person signs off on it and says it's okay and agrees to do it, how far do we go? I think you can probably think of at least one or more people on the internet who are doing extreme, ridiculous things literally on a daily or weekly basis. And the question is, how far do we go and why is this allowed? Right? I mean, I'm not going to say names. You can literally think of it right now. You can think of at least one person, correct? I know I can. And it's like, why is this allowed? It's awful. It's torturous. I don't care if the person agreed to this. It's still wrong. Why is it allowed? Right? Derek says Nasubi these days spends most of his time as an activist. He helps raise money for his hometown of Fukushima, which was hurt by that earthquake back in 2011, that big disastrous earthquake, right? So there you go. Yeah. It doesn't matter if someone agrees to something. Is it right? Is it wrong? Is it torturous? Is it morally wrong? It shouldn't be allowed. Especially monetization and making money off of it. It's messed up, man. It really is messed up. All right. So, cool. How long is this video? We may have to... I'm interested in this because I knew about this in the 1990s. In the 1990s, they did an official crossover between Marvel and DC. Let's skip the intro.
Oh, cool. Thanks. Let me set the mood. The year is 1996. Frosted Tips are in, the Spice Girls are blasting from the boombox, and A Love Story About a Tornado is the second highest grossing movie of the year. Then, out of nowhere, bam! DC vs. Marvel Comics #1 hits the shelves and changes everything that you think that you might know about these worlds. So the multiverse has been a thing at these two companies for decades, but like, what if they were people? See, in this book, the Marvel and DC multiverses are personified as a pair of brothers that look like weird, nondescript action figures that you'd find at a dollar store. And at the beginning of time, they just kind of floated in the emptiness of space, not knowing that the other one existed. However, when they became aware of each other's presence, they have to do what any comic book...
This looks pretty stupid, doesn't it? It's probably one of the dumbest explanations of a multiverse ever before they came up with more modern ones. This is from 1996.
Character does when they meet somebody. Fight. Like, seriously, superhero fights are so common, it's ridiculous.
See you later, Steve. Have a nice day.
Don't tell me what to do. Since the brothers were evenly matched, their battle erupted into a huge explosion that shattered their essences into multiverses. And in the process, they forgot all of their memories and just went back to floating in space.
How convenient.
Fast forward a few millennia, and hey look, they met each other once again, and now they have to fight again. It's implied that this crossover is the reason why the two brothers notice each other, but that doesn't make a lot of sense considering the fact that there have been Marvel and DC crossovers in the past. And don't try to tell me that those aren't canon to this book, because the Joker straight up references the last time that Spider-Man was in Gotham. I'm watching you, commenter. I did my research. Trust me. Instead of fighting each other like Rock'em Sock'em robots, the brothers instead pick champions from the worlds inside of them to fight each other in their place. Whichever brother's champions loses the most fights must be completely destroyed. And by that logic, whichever company loses would have to stop publishing their comics. Does that mean that there's an extremely convenient cop-out ending that results in a tie? Well, I guess you're just gonna have to watch the rest of the video and find out. So
no, you don't,
time for me
of
to
course.
pad out that sweet, sweet watch time. Or get instantly undone by the commenters that are just going to link the timecode in the description to skip over to that part. I'm watching you. Please don't. I could really use the money. Now, I'm sure that there's a lot of you guys that are thinking,
Okay, Drake, you are spending way too much time talking about these cosmic brothers, and I really, really don't care. I only want to hear about Marvel and DC characters fighting.
And bro, I totally get you, but I need you to understand.
All right, let's get to the part where they start fighting.
fans. Oh, and in case you somehow forgot, this is peak 90s comics, so there's like a lot of really weird shit going on with a lot of these characters. For example, this Spider-Man is not actually Peter Parker, but rather his clone, Ben Reilly.
Yep.
The Hulk is in his professor form like in Endgame, Thor looks like he's trying to join a hair metal band, and Superboy is just being Superboy. I'm also low-key upset that even though the brothers represent the Marvel and DC multiverses, the only characters involved in the events are the characters from the mainstream continuities. And I know that these are the characters that we all actually want to see get into a fight, but it feels very, very small when this is like a massive cosmic event. Anyway, clocking in at only 4 issues, DC vs. Marvel Comics was a super short series, which is a real shame because the few things outside of the brothers that we did get was a lot of fun. Oddly enough though, I feel like the character interactions were a lot more entertaining than the fights themselves, with a lot of Easter eggs and fan service being crammed in for diehard fans. My favorite has to be when Elektra beats Catwoman in a fight, who falls into a truck of sand, which seems to be like a callback to Batman Returns.
Saved by kitty litter.
You know, now is as good of a time as any to talk about what I know that we're all actually here for, the versus part of DC versus Marvel Comics. There are 11 champions from each company, and the fact that there's an odd number of matches means that it would be impossible for there to be a tie, which is super surprising. I mean, these kinds of crossovers generally tend to give an even amount of weight to both companies involved. That is, unless you're Marvel during the release of Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, where they told Capcom that they weren't allowed to show Marvel characters losing in a fight in any of the promotional material. But still, even the name of this crossover was evenly distributed between Marvel and DC, with it being called DC vs. Marvel Comics in issues 1 and 4, and Marvel Comics vs. DC in issues 2 and 3. The fights themselves, though, are broken up into 2 categories, kind of like boxing: the undercards and the main events. The battles start off with Thor vs. Captain Marvel, the DC Captain Marvel who later got renamed to Shazam, that is. Both have power over lightning, and before they fight, they have this super charming moment that's very appropriate for 2 beings who possess the power of gods to do. They pray. Now, even though Captain Marvel has a whole acronym's worth of superpowers, at the end of the day, it's the magic lightning that grants them to him. And it's because of this that Thor's mastery over the Zappy Zap put him at an advantage, and wiped the floor of this competition. But in the process, he lost his hammer. More on that later. Next up is a quick water fight between Aquaman and Namor that ends when Aquaman drops a freaking whale on his opponent.
I was gonna say, like, Aquaman and Namor, they're almost the same person. They pretty much are the same person, just different comic lines.
This is followed by Flash vs. Quicksilver, which isn't even a contest, with the fastest man alive making quick work of Pietro. Then we get Robin vs. Jubilee in the middle of their love story.
Robin versus Jubilee? Jubilee? Why did they ever think she was on the level of Robin? It's ridiculous.
And the Boy Wonder defeats her without throwing a single punch. He instead ties her up, and things get... So this put DC at a major advantage on the scorecard, so Marvel had to make up points by having Silver Surfer beat Green Lantern, and the aforementioned victory of Elektra over Catwoman. And if you think that I'm flying through these fights way too quickly, I kinda have to, because there's only like 3 pages max for each of these, so there's not really a lot for me to work with. Yeah, why elaborate on the fights that people actually care about when we can just talk about the big cosmic brothers for like 50 pages? While the undercard fights were handled by the book's writers, the outcome of the major 5 battles were decided by the readers, with them being able to vote either through email or by mailing in a physical ballot. As a result,
What's funny is Wolverine versus Lobo. Like, today, no one really knows who Lobo is or cares. But in the 90s, Lobo was like the Wolverine anti-hero of DC. So people would have thought that would have been a worthy fight. Today, people would be like, who cares about that?
Means that these major fights were a straight-up popularity contest, and didn't take into consideration who would actually win in a fight. This led to some outcomes that I personally really don't agree with, but I was 3 years old when this book came out, so it's not like I could have done anything about it. I was still learning how to count to 100, not voting. The first major battle was between Lobo and Wolverine in a space bar, with most of the tussle taking place behind the counter, out of sight from the reader. What a major letdown! I mean, these are 2 greedy many fighters that are able to recover from pretty much anything. This could have been a really awesome and brutal fight with limbs constantly getting chopped off and regrown, but nope! This was directly followed up with the disappointing matchup between Storm and Wonder Woman, the latter of which was revealed to be worthy of Thor's hammer. Now, sadly, we don't get to see Diana actually using the hammer since she thought that it wouldn't make for a fair fight, which makes you think that she was going to win, thus proving that with or without the power-up, she'd go out on top. Nope! Storm's victory makes zero sense to me because I'm pretty sure that a literal goddess could beat a weather witch. Next up is the Attack of the Clones with Ben Reilly against Superboy. It's a popularity contest. The only person who could give Spider-Man a run for his money, even a clone of him, is probably Batman. So Superboy, get out of here. Now this fight, I love. It's Superman versus the Incredible Hulk. These two get teleported to the Grand Canyon so they can fight all out. I especially love the art, which does a fantastic job of communicating the weight of each punch. Superman ended up victorious, which I know is going to piss off a lot of folks, but I feel like this is actually a great time to mention that for all of these fights, the art was actually drawn up for both outcomes. At the time of this recording, only one alternate ending has been publicly released, and it's where the Hulk triumphed over Superman. This is really, really cool to see, and I hope that someday we'll get all of this stuff released publicly. Now, before we can get to the last of the main fights, I'd like to point out that, yeah, you're not going blind. There is no Iron Man to be seen in this book. I know it's surprising given the fact that he's now one of the most famous superheroes of all time thanks to the MCU, but the reason that the first Iron Man movie was made in the first place was because he was such a B or C tier character. Remember, Marvel sold off the film rights to all of their popular heroes at the time to save themselves from going bankrupt, and people just did not care about Iron Man. He wasn't even important enough to be shoved onto any of the covers of the crossover, or even this glimpse of a lot of character heads. Captain Atom, of all people, has higher billing than him. Oh wait, never mind. Actually, there's Tony Stark for the one single time that he makes an appearance. But enough kicking the can. The final fight is between Batman and Captain America in a Manhattan sewer. The battle gets interrupted when some water gets flushed, and Cap nearly drowns in some poop water before Batman saves him and claims a victory for the DC side. But once they emerge from these smelly, smelly depths, they come face to face with one of the dumbest comic characters ever made. This is Access, aka Axel Asher, which is the most 90s name ever conceived. He's from the Marvel Universe and somehow contains a shard inside of him of the big cosmic brothers that was broken off during their original conflict eons ago. He is the guardian of this cardboard box that is actually an interdimensional gateway that is being held together with duct tape. Because comics. However, before Batman and Cap could be filled in on what was going on, the worlds began to unravel. You see, behind the scenes of this event were powerful cosmic entities from both sides, the Spectre and the Living Tribunal, and they thought that the only way to stop the brothers from fighting was to actually fuse them together into one being. As a result, Marvel and DC shut down publication of their books and instead formed an entirely brand new comic company.
I totally forgot about that. That for a while they did Amalgam Comics, the infused heroes. I totally forgot this existed because I wasn't reading comics anymore. I'd stopped reading comics at that time. Oh my god. That is so stupid. I'm not gonna lie, that's really stupid. Man, this is going on though. I want to finish it. What do we got? Okay, we got 3 minutes. We can finish this.
Amalgam Comics. Yup, all of your favorite characters from both companies are now combined together into new ones. Wolverine and Batman became Dark Claw, and Superman and Captain America became Super Soldier. Doctor Strange Fate, Spider-Boy, Speed Demon. So many new books were all published all at once. Now, obviously both companies didn't actually go out of business, but the timing of this publicity stunt was amazing. You see, comics are generally released on Wednesdays, and sometimes there are 5 weeks in a month. So for these 5th week celebrations, publishers tend to do some really experimental stuff with their comic books, like the very awesome Looney Tunes DC Comics crossover that I absolutely adore. So for 5th week, neither DC or Marvel published their regular titles, and instead, it was all Amalgam. These 12 comics threw you right into the middle of the history of this fusion world, so literally everybody was confused when they picked them up. The books reference older comics that simply don't exist, and hell, there's even fake fan mail published in the back arguing about continuity errors in these books that don't exist. This was confusing, over the top, and ridiculous, and I honestly love it. But sadly, these worlds were pulled back apart just as quickly as they were fused together, and the brothers went right on back to fighting. It wasn't until Access used his powers to make the brothers see the origin stories of both Batman and Captain America that they ceased their conflict and gave each other a hearty handshake. It's a weird ending to a weird book, but I'm glad it exists for the sheer absurdity of it.
Wow.
Most of what happened in this series would be forgotten to time, but it did have a little bit of a legacy since the following year there were 12 more Amalgam comics that were released for another 5th week celebration. And there was also a sequel comic about Access. You know, the character that nobody cared about. Because of all of the complications of there being a dual copyright, the DC vs. Marvel Comics event, the Access sequel comic, and Amalgam Comics have all never been re-released digitally, which makes them very hard to track down.
Wow.
And that's a real shame, because even though I crap on this book a whole lot, it's probably the most well-remembered Marvel and DC crossover, and it really goes to show how equally valid both companies are in the comic book world. It's an interesting and convoluted and really strange book, but like, if it wasn't that, then it wouldn't be a superhero comic. But anyway,
I actually wonder, because they never digitally redid it, does that mean the physical copies are worth more? Because back then, this is after the comic bubble was bursting. In the late 90s, comics were being printed so much, they had no value anymore. Really, like, every new issue of Spider-Man, X-Men, Batman, Superman, they'd be printed a ridiculous amount of copies. So because of that, they didn't have any value. There weren't even collector's items anymore. You know what I mean? Comic books that have value are the ones before they were considered having value, so no one kept them. They weren't mass produced, and now today they're worth a ton of money. You see? So I wonder. Because I remember when this event happened, but I was out of collecting comics. I didn't care anymore. Oh, yeah? Denton says, they're pretty cheap, $35 for the first 4 issues. That's not that, yeah, that's actually not that big of a deal. Okay, all right. Thank you for watching the first part, DSP versus the Internet for the week. I hope you enjoyed. See you in part 2.